Welcome or welcome back to Solo Marvel Champion. Today I am reviewing and giving my thoughts on Collector 1. Collector 1 is the second scenario of Galaxy's Most Wanted, and it's actually called Infiltrate the Museum, but the very next scenario is Escape the Museum, which is also a Collector scenario, so we call them Collector 1 and Collector 2. Now I'm doing this review primarily because of this comment. I've been very vocal on my channel about absolutely loving this scenario. It is one of, if not my favorite scenario in the game. And you have to ask the question, is that because it is the pinnacle of perfect design? And the answer to that is definitely not. There are two problems with this scenario that make it difficult and reviled. So I'm going to break this video into three parts. Part 1 is just going to be an overview, looking at Collector's cards, seeing what he does and how he does it. Part 2 will be my review. It'll be short and sweet. And then Part 3 is going to be why I love this scenario, despite everything I've said up to that point. So let's get into it. Let's take a look at Collector. First, we're going to look at his main scheme. We do get 2 mod sets plus standard. Galactic Artifacts has several interesting attachments and, side schemes. And it is a really cool modular encounter set. I'm going to talk about these side schemes here in just a moment. We also get Menagerie Medley, which is full of minions. Those minions are going to be a problem in a couple different ways. And then we have a setup ability. Create the collection game area and put the top card of your deck face down in the collective. Collection. I'm going to say collective sometimes, but I mean collection. So as soon as the game starts, we put a card over here. This flips up. Now let's take a look at Collector. Collector 1, Stage 1 is a 2 scheme, 1 attack. And you are going to notice when we get to Collector Stage 2, that goes up by 1 each. 3 scheme, 2 attack. This version has a forced interrupt. They all have mainly this same interrupt, but when a card, player, or encounter would be placed into a discard pile from play, place it face up in the collection instead. The big problem here that a lot of people dislike, and maybe some fail to realize in gameplay, I know I did this wrong the first time I played him, player or encounter card. That's why I said I'd come back to these. This is a minion from the encounter deck. It is an encounter card. When this minion is defeated, it actually goes, and I put that wrong, it should be face up. It goes face up in the collection. So the question a lot of people have, which kind of doesn't make thematic sense, is why would the collector collect things he already has control of? That's a little bit of a thematic disconnect. I think maybe it's just ego. A lot of these things aren't in his kit. They are in modular encounter sets. So he doesn't control these servant bots, psionic ghosts, and star sharks. They are something out in the world that happen to be here that he wishes to connect. That is a way to look at it, but it does make things a little more difficult. Great example, Servant Bot. Guard and Patrol. You have to defeat this in order to defeat Collector, although there, of course, are some ways around Guard. But he has 3 hit points. If I use my hero to defeat him, he goes to the collection. If he defeats Hawkeye, Hawkeye goes to the collection. If Hawkeye defeats him, while taking his final consequential damage, they both go to the collection. And furthermore, if you have an upgrade on Hawkeye, and he attacks, defeats the servant bot, and then takes his final consequential, all 3 of these cards go to the collection. So that is a little bit difficult to manage for a lot of people, I think. And I'm going to get to management here in just a second as well. Before I do, though, I want to talk about something I see online a lot is people misunderstanding cards going to the collection. So let's say I've got Hawkeye in play. I can attack with him. He takes consequential, and then I play Get Ready. It readies him. They say, well, now does Get Ready have to go in the discard pile? No. Get Ready was never in play. Events are not in play and then go to the discard pile. They just go to the discard pile. So Get Ready was never in play. It does not go to the collection. Any event you play goes to discard and was never in play. So that is something people misunderstand or just don't understand, you know, as part of the game. So now let's talk about collection management really quickly. There is, on the main scheme, this bit of bold text. If there are at least 5 per player cards in the collection, or if this stage is complete, you lose the game. So playing true solo, you're trying not to have 5 in here, and that is difficult. We do have this hero action. Choose to either exhaust your hero or spend 2 resources of any type to discard a card from the collection. And then it would either go to the encounter deck discard or your own discard, depending on what kind of card it was. This is one of the things that people don't like about this encounter as well, because a player can only do it once per round. I'm totally fine with that, though, because if it were too easy, it wouldn't add any difficulty. It wouldn't add anything additional to the game. You might spend a turn clearing out the collection, whereas if you can only do it once per round, it makes you play your round a little differently and a little less efficiently, but you're not going to just spend your entire turn clearing the collection. You know, Captain America, he can exhaust, discard 1. Discard a card to ready, exhaust again to remove 1 from the collection. Then he can spend that double resource he has to remove a 3rd card, and then he's got 2 resources left in hand, or 2 cards left in hand. He can ditch those as well to get a 4th out. That is the reason we have limit once per player per round. So that you can't just in one turn spend your whole turn removing everything from the collection. I actually do like the fact that you can only do 1 per round. So that's managing the collection. You're given a way to get cards out, but there are way more cards, or way more ways for cards to go in than ways for you to take them out. I think that's another big problem. So Collector 1, let's look at his stats. 2 scheme, 1 attack, 13 hit points, and then Collector 2, or Stage 2, 3 scheme, 2 attack, 14 hit points. So that's 27 total. That's not a big deal. But let's look at the abilities on Collector Stage 2. When revealed, each player chooses to put the top card of their deck face up in the collection or takes 3 damage. And that's cool, right? You can choose to take damage instead of putting a card in. There might already be 4 cards in there, and you'll gladly take that 3 damage rather than putting the 5th card in. The forced interrupt is the same, though, but without the explanatory text. When a card would be placed into a discard pile from play, put it face up in the collection instead. So that part is the same. But now let's take a look at Collector 3. Big thing you'll notice is the stat increases by 1 again. 4 scheme, 3 attack, and those are big numbers. So not only do you have the pressure of cards in the collection, you're going to have a lot of threat pressure in this scenario. The main scheme starts out at 4. It only goes up 1 per turn, but the collector schemes for a lot as well. So that's definitely something to keep your eye on. We also see a change in these abilities. When revealed, put the top card of each player's deck face up in the collection and place 1 threat on the main scheme for each card in the collection. So if you're playing on Expert, collection management becomes much more imperative because you're always going to lose if you get 5 in there, but now you might lose because there are 3 cards in here, and putting 3 more on the main forces it to scheme out. The forced interrupt changes a little bit as well. When a card would be placed into a discard pile from play, place it face up in the collection instead, then place 1 threat on the main. So Stage 3 really ratchets up the threat pressure, and I'm here for that. We always have 2 lose conditions, right? A main scheme scheming out or you getting defeated by the villain. This third lose condition is really fun, and I see it as a puzzle, and I will talk about that a little more when I get to part 3, talking about why I love this scenario. So I did mention earlier that there are a lot of ways for cards to go to the collection. Every card that comes from this scenario can either potentially or definitely put itself or a card from your deck into the collection. Monarch Starstalker is a minion, so obviously when he gets defeated, he's going. But he's also villainous, so he can hit really hard. He might hit for 5 and send an ally that was blocking to the collection. Biogram Image, this prevents damage that would go to the collector and then goes to the collection. Again, and then it adds threat to the main, equal to the amount that was prevented. So when this card comes out, you want someone who can hit him for 1. It doesn't matter how much this prevents, it will go to discard regardless. But what matters is how much threat you put on the main. So you want to be able to hit for 1 when this comes in. View the Cosmos. There are 2 of these. When revealed, you either put the highest cost card from your hand in the collection, or you discard the highest cost card from your hand, and then place threat on the main equal to its printed cost. So again, really ratcheting up threat pressure if you choose to not have another card go in the collection. Stay a While will force different decisions in Alter Ego or in hero form. In Alter Ego, choose to either spend physical, or put the top card face up in the collection. In hero, he attacks with +1 attack. I mean, if you're on stage 3, he's attacking for 4 plus a boost. And if you take any amount of damage from that attack, put the top card in the collection. So that one can be tough. That's not only hitting you, it's also more than likely putting a card in the collection. Inconspicuous Box. When revealed, put the lowest cost card you control into the collection. And if you can't, if you have no cards with cost on them, it gains Surge. Then our old favorite, Caught Off Guard. This is a copy that is in his deck. That's a second copy because Standard has one of these as well. So he loves putting stuff in the collection. And the main thing you have to worry about while trying to defeat Collector is getting cards out of the collection because so many can go in so many different ways. Now, I did talk about these side schemes earlier. These side schemes in Galactic Artifacts all have victory 0. So they never go to discard. When you defeat them, they go to the victory display. So the forced interrupt never triggers. If this went to discard, the forced interrupt would force it to the collection, but they never go to discard. They go to the victory display. So that's something to keep in mind. And most player side schemes also have victory 0. Like Jubilees does not. but almost every other player side scheme in the game, if not every other player side scheme in the game, goes to victory rather than the discard pile. So that's a quick look at Collector. There's a lot of threat pressure. There's pressure from the collection with a loss condition. And there are limited ways to get cards out of the collection. With that said, let me go to my review. Here in the review portion, I'm only looking at two things: difficulty and fun. Difficulty, even for me who loves this scenario, it's not the most difficult, but it is very difficult. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 for difficulty. For fun, of course, fun is very subjective. I love this scenario, so for me, this is a 5 out of 5 for fun. However, it can be really, really frustrating, and the fact that encounter cards are going to the collection and you can only remove once per round from the collection may not seem fun, and be frustrating to players. So overall, with my own bias out, I'm going to give this one a maybe 1.5 for fun. I was going to give it a 2. I was kind of torn between a 1 or 2 for fun, so I split the difference. I said, okay, this is a 1.5 for fun. If you enjoy doing that management, you've got threat management, you've got collection management. If that's something you enjoy, this is going to be a fun scenario for you. I think it'll be as fun for you as it is for me. Now, let's move on to part 3. Part 3, I want to talk about the reasons that I love this scenario despite all the bad stuff I've already said about it. And I'm going to compare it to one of my favorite games of all time. I have talked about this game on the channel as well. That's Thunderbolt Apache Leader. Thunderbolt Apache Leader by Danverson Games is a different sort of game. I'm not sure it's a war game per se, but it has you managing squadrons of airplanes against enemy battalions that are racing towards your base. In that game, I have to manage pilot stress, aircraft damage, dwindling resources, and battalion or enemy battalion positions on the map, because the closer they get to my base, the more stressful it is for pilots. So that is a lot to manage, and I love that aspect of the game because I have a lot to manage. And that is why this one is so high on my list. I have threat to manage, and I have the collection to manage. So those two things I have to do while also trying to pile damage on the collector. For me, that is a lot of fun. There is one other scenario that has some of that going for it, and that is Sandman. Sandman's City Streets is going to keep getting sand and popping off, removing cards from the encounter deck. And of course, the faster you do that, the more likely you are to get an acceleration token, and then there are other consequences for having acceleration tokens. So, not to this extent, but I love Sandman as well, because I also have to manage the sand on that City Streets environment. Now, something else, when I'm playing Collector 1 and even Sandman, I approach deck building differently. Like, I'm not going to have Nick in my deck and Professor X when I'm playing Collector 1, because even if he's not defeated, you discard him at the end of the round. And since he was in play, he goes to the collection. I'm also not going to include upgrades which go on my allies in decks that I'm building specifically to go against Collector 1. because that's a twofer. Not only do you lose Hawkeye, you lose Inspired, and because they were in play, when they would go to discard, they both go to the collection. So when I'm playing Collector 1, I am prioritizing events mainly. I want to have events that do my work for me rather than, I don't want to say rather than allies, because you still need allies, and I'll touch on that a bit here in a second. But rather than things that sit out there and then go away. Anything with uses, I try not to use against Collector 1, because as soon as they would go to discard pile, they're going to the collection instead. Now, I did mention Hawkeye and allies. I still have allies, of course, in my deck because they do a lot of work for you. However, I'm looking for ways to protect my allies. Innovation is a great resource. When you spend that resource in hero form, heal 1 damage from an ally. So that helps you keep your allies around a little bit longer. Right from the core set, First Aid, is that what it's called, First Aid? I don't have one in front of me. It heals your ally, well, it heals any friendly character by 2. That's another way to keep your allies in play. And one of my favorite cards, if you're playing an Avenger, is Inspiring Presence. Inspiring Presence will heal 1 from an ally and ready them. So I can attack with Hawkeye, play Inspiring Presence to both ready him and heal him 1. So that was basically a free attack out of Hawkeye. And I showed in, I think it was my Ant-Man video, I had an ally with 2 damage on him. I used Innovation to play Inspiring Presence. So Innovation took 1 damage off, and then Innovation readied him and took the 2nd damage off. So I'm always looking for ways to heal allies that don't have uses, right? I'm not going to use Med Team against Collector 1 because Med Team is going to go to discard. So I prefer to run mainly events and ways to keep allies around, while avoiding things that naturally go to discard like Nick, and upgrades on allies, because if you lose that ally, you'll lose the upgrade too. So in, which one was it? View the Cosmos, put the highest cost card from your hand face up in the collection, or discard the highest cost card from your hand and place it, and then place threat on the main equal to its cost. So when that comes out, you know, I hate having something like Hawkeye in hand because he's either going to get discarded from my hand or go to the collection. And if I don't put him in the collection, I also have to add 3 threat to the main. Again, this scenario is about threat management as much as it is about collection management. So then, on top of changing how I build a deck, it really forces you to change how you play while you're in the scenario. Okay, I can attack Collector and get 2 more damage on him, or since I'm at 3 cards right now, and there's always a possibility of a couple cards going into the collection, I'm going to exhaust instead of attack and get Hawkeye into my discard pile. Now, this isn't Make the Call, but I can use something like Make the Call to play Hawkeye again. So it definitely, as well as changing how I build a deck, it also changes how I play that deck when I'm facing the Collector. So that was a very rambly way of explaining why I love Collector 1. Goes back to Thunderbolt Apache Leader. I love having multiple avenues to manage. Managing threat while managing the collection is my jam. That is a lot of fun. But I also can acknowledge the problems in this scenario. The fact that encounter cards can go to the collection and you only have 1 chance per round to get something out of the collection. Those 2 things combined do suck a lot. And that's why I'm giving this a high difficulty. And I'm saying that if that is not something you enjoy, this is a very low fun, 1.5 in my opinion. So let me know what you think in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me why some other things I didn't even mention make this a totally miserable encounter. Or say, hey, you know what? I never thought about that. I'll look at Collector a different way. But that's my review and thoughts on Collector 1. I am going to continue with some other villain reviews. Part of something I'm doing is building my playlist of core-only content. So I'm going to review Rhino, Claw, and Ultron in this same way, using this same style. So thank you so much for watching. I look forward to those as well, and hope you have a marvelous day.